my involvement, I was a big softball player even as a young adult. I played with teams and various teams in softball leagues.
In fact, I think I remember seeing some photos. I'm going to have to dig, and we may put one like right here so you guys can see Pastor with the ball cap on and a softball team.
Yeah, that was way, way, way back. I looked a lot different.
This is a good way to start, I think, right?
And Friday?
This Friday?
Friday!
You can move the mountains. Yeah. You can move. Oh. You can move the mountains. You can move the mountains. You can move the mountains.
We can cut that out.
We'll have to cut by.
Pastor, you talked about that you got into ministry late in life. And I know that there's a lot of things that happened in your life before ministry leading up to that point. I know that you got in church when you were a young boy. And there's a whole story there too that if you want to go into, you can. I know a lot of people maybe know that story of how you got into the church, but could you talk to us a little bit about what your life was like before ministry and if that helped form and shape your life in ministry now?
Yeah, I think before ministry, I was just a typical boy in the church. We got in the church when I was about 8 years old, and just a typical boy in the church on the pew. But my life kind of took a little turn. Maybe when I was about 14, I guess, I started playing guitar. I'd always loved sports, so even at that time, I was very sports oriented. Playing sports when my parents would let me and that sort of thing. And but I developed on the guitar pretty rapidly, and it wasn't long I was playing in church, had that opportunity. So I kind of had two avenues of my personal life as a kid. It was this sports guy, and then it was this music guy, because I had found this place, this niche in church. I didn't realize at the time that it was really ministry. It was God starting to use me, and God kind of pulling me away from the sports mind that I'd always had, because I had been really engrossed in sports because I was kind of talented as a kid, and I loved playing, I loved watching, I loved being involved in the sports realm. But once I became developed into the music ministry and playing and enjoying the guitar and being a part of worship in church, it became more real to me, and it started developing who I am. So I had those two things in life that were challenging me, driving me. Mm-hmm. And so, that's kind of before ministry, before preaching ministry, that's where my life was. And then, of course, later got married and still having both of those aspects in my life. But at some point in my early 20s, I kind of realized I needed to give up sports. I needed to quit that avenue of being in that involvement, and I went heavier and more involved in the Lord. And I think it was in that time that the shift started kind of coming into my life to be more spiritual and less carnal, if you would, or just a natural person, and leading myself more into the idea of ministry through worship. And I really honestly felt like that's where I would be, because I didn't get called to preaching ministry until I was 30. Mm-hmm. So, all these years, even my young adult life, when I was young married, it was just music. So I began, after I started another church, I became a music minister there. And so I was playing music and leading in worship for a long time. I felt like that was my calling. I was satisfied to do that. But there was this shift that went on. And I think all the time the Lord was grooming me, developing me spiritually, maybe when I really didn't even know it. I was just kind of doing what was natural.
And it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to hear you reference it like that too, because I know, with Dad preaching yesterday, he talked about or referenced David and the story of David and Goliath, and that being, one of your favorite stories in the Bible. But it's neat because to hear you kind of walk through that explanation of your life before ministry, you see a cool parallel there in the life of David, because David had to go through those times watching Dad's sheep and all of that stuff that led through, the experience with the lion, the experience with the bear. all those things that happened before he ever could stand before Goliath. And so it's neat to see the process that God has for refining men, and the fact that it really doesn't change. It is a continual process that God continues to refine us,
Exactly.
to test us, to try us. But I think it's a cool parallel there to see kind of your life before ministry leading up to that point, and how that does kind of parallel what we read and see and learn from the life of David.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and I'm curious too, as you're saying that, I think anybody that knows you knows that you're a very driven person. You have it, like when you wake up in the morning, you have a plan for what's going on that day, that week, that month. You have projects going on. There's always improvement. And that's what makes this church so great, is the vision that you cast as a pastor. But even before, I don't think that's an attribute you just found later in life. That's probably just in your makeup. So as a young man before ministry, what do you think drove you? When you woke up in the morning, what drove you? You know what I mean? Before running a church, there had to be something else that was taking your energy and your focus. What do you think that was?
Just realizing we've never reached our full potential. Even as a young person, you can always be better.
Mm-hmm.
You can always do more. You can always advance and learn. I was natural in learning, and I guess you'd say kind of gifted in school, that things just become natural. But I realized you could always be better. A shift in my life came really, and I've talked about it before, is when a young man testified. He was several years older than I was, but he was still a young man. He testified in church one time, and I was so moved. I think I was probably moved more by that testimony than anything that's ever been said and done in church. And I think that's what started shaping me before ministry. I really said, I can be that like that. I heard that testimony that was so impacting, and I was kind of quiet by nature. Although I had dreams and aspirations, I was kind of a quiet-natured person. But when I heard that testimony, I said, I can be like that. And I really defined myself then and said, I can change who I am. I've always been a quiet person, but I need to be more vocal. I need to be more outward. I think that was a defining moment in who I would become, certainly as a pastor and a leader, because I said to myself verbally that day, I'm going to change who I am. I'm going to be more like that. And I think that started developing me that passion that I had even as a child to achieve and go further. That helped me realize in God who I really was and who I really could be.
Yeah.
If I wanted to pursue God, like maybe I was pursuing some of these other things in life. And I think that can become a defining moment for many people when they realize, you know what, I can really do this, and God can help me do this and go after it. So that's kind of how some of that unfolded.
That's awesome.
Well, leading from that, continuing, we were talking about your life before ministry. As you started to see this shift in your life and you started to feel that can we maybe talk about, so from that point, obviously you didn't go from just feeling God working in your life to all of a sudden pastoring a church. There was a process that even continued there in making a decision to, with a family, go to Bible college, through that process even. And because I feel like that speaks or will speak to some of our kids. We have a lot of youth and even hyphen age that are in that decision process, from the last few years of high school, even leading into college and deciding where to go. And I feel like that's something they may be able to draw from. So,
I would go back a little bit from that time to when my life began to shift. And my life began to really shift when I realized sports is good and sports is fun, but where does sports take you?
Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean to you in the end to be athletic when there's so many other things to be?
Right.
And with my involvement, I was a big softball player even as a young adult. I played with teams and various teams in softball leagues.
In fact, I think I remember seeing some photos. I'm going to have to dig, and we may put one like right here so you guys can see Pastor with the ball cap on and a softball team.
Yeah, but it was way, way, way back. I looked a lot different then. But I remember the defining moment I played left field softball. Loved it. I was a great outfielder. And I remember that time in the outfield playing that game, and the Lord dealt with me and said, what does this all mean? And I started thinking I was in the outfield playing a game, and I'm like, what is all of this? What am I doing here? And I remember in the outfield telling the Lord, this is it. I quit. Today is the end of this. That was my last game. I remember when I caught the last fly ball, and we come in, the game was over. I come in and I said, this is it. This is the last time I'll go on this field. And it literally was. And that began to shape my life in ministry, because that was a defining moment that I said, God, I choose you over all these things that I feel like I'm good at. I want to be good at you. And wherever that takes me. And that was even long before I became a preacher. So my life began to develop from that. And I just kind of give up sports altogether. And I was playing music, so I began my involvement in church. Not just church, my involvement in God. It peaked. My communication with God changed from that day.
Right.
I think because God saw in me a desire for Him more than the things of the world. And it just happened. But by that communication between me and Him, and it was a sweet, wonderful thing, a defining moment in my life. And so from that, I would develop. And then at the age of 30, working and coming home, and the Lord dealing with me, and just in prayer, several days back to back at home, I would get on my knees and begin to pray. I'd be by myself before my wife got home from work. And I began to call on the Lord, and I felt something. I felt a tug. I didn't even know what it was, because being a preacher was the last thing I really desired to do. I was happy with him as a musician. I was happy in worship. I was happy in the church.
Right.
But God had more for me to do because of my level of commitment to Him.
Right.
And so for several days, He was dealing with me. And I didn't really know where it was going, but I would find myself praying. Several days back to back at home. I'd get home early. I'd be on my knees praying in the extra bedroom. I remember it vividly, even to this day. And the Lord spoke to me. And I said, Lord, what do you want from me? That question to the Lord. And He spoke to me and said, I want you to preach my word. And I was taken back. I was like, oh, Lord. And I talked back to the Lord out loud. I said, God, I can't preach your word. I don't know how to preach your word. And the Lord spoke to me again. He said, you can't do it through you, but you can and will do it through me. And I accepted that call right then and there. And I knew my life would change. Now, it was several years even after that I'd go to Bible college. At least 3 more years. I was called in 1992. That's when that event that happened in my life. But it was like 3 years later. I didn't go to Bible college till 1995. But it was in that development process of answering that call. And the Lord prepared me and getting me ready to go to Bible college and to focus my life more in the vein of, okay, God, you've called me. What do I need to do to prepare myself? And so Bible college was definitely a part of that and a focus of that. And that's probably another whole thought to talk about, is that time in Bible college, that shift in my life where God was taking me.
Yeah, maybe we can save maybe that specific part for another video, because I know even through that process of originally going to Kent, right?
Right.
And then the closure of that, I'm sure there even could have been some questioning in your mind. Okay, I've made this decision to, accept this call, and you take the step to go to Bible college, and then with all that change, then in life always comes the question of, well, is this still where I'm at? Is this what you're still calling me to do? It can throw a whole lot of questions into your world then really quickly.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what happened. And we'll talk about that just a little bit if it's okay. When I went to Bible college, I went to Dover, Delaware, to Kent. And like you said, and then after 1 year, find out they were going to shut the school down. They were having some financial difficulties, and they decided to close the school. So here I am with a young family, 2 little girls, moved to Dover, Delaware, with the expectations of staying there at least 2 years to get that Bible college and get associate's degree. and then 1 year they're closing. And so me not knowing what am I going to do now, Lord? But unbeknownst to me, God had another plan, a shift that He would take me somewhere else, but I didn't know it at the time. And so through the summer of that year, after that first year of Bible college, I was working as a plumber. I got a job to make finances, ends meet, and I was working through the summer as a plumber, and I had a great job. In fact, they offered me a permanent position if I just wanted to stay in Delaware and settle down there and work there in the ministry. And I was kind of torn, didn't know what to do, until one day I was praying at work, and it was kind of the same situation, that like, Lord, what do you want me to do? Just like He did when He called me about 3 years prior. And I felt the Lord speak to me. And the Lord told me, He said, finish what you started. You need to finish what you set out to do. And I knew right then I had to finish my college, that I had another year to go somewhere to college. And so it's just like it changed just moments. When I went home that day, I told my wife, I said, okay, I know what we're going to do. Get your stuff packed, because we're going to be leaving shortly. We're going to move, and we're going to Gateway, which was all the way across, halfway across the country to St. Louis. And but my life would drastically change through all of that. The people we would meet, our focus, everything was different, and God knew it all along. But you know, it was those times of consecration. It was those times of trusting the Lord, even when I didn't have the answer, even when I felt like I was at a stopping point, like, well, okay, what do we do now, because this is not working. When I got there and the college closes, only to realize God had even a greater plan, that we would go and finish my schooling there for the next year, and then consequently to end up right back at home when Brother Cole calls me back to become the youth pastor here. And from that, everything just evolved. Just listening to the Lord and trusting Him, He's definitely guided our steps.